Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Did someone order a story about another crazy customer? Well, here you go. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. A pound of everything. This is probably close to 20 years ago when I was working in a deli in a supermarket. There was usually 2 to 5 of us working back there, as it could be relatively busy depending on the day and time of day. It was a pretty average day, maybe a little on the slow side, but I recall 2 women approaching the counter, and as I always did, put on a decent smile and asked how I could assist. The 2 ladies were middle-aged, at my best guess and recollection, and it seemed like one of them was there to order and the other was possibly just providing company. The customer spoke to me very politely and gave me a list of about 6 various lunch meat and cheeses that she needed before turning back to her friend and engaging in conversation that I either don't remember or was too low volume to hear at the time. I'm not in the habit of paying attention to others' business, as I was repeating all 6 in my head to make sure I remembered each one. As I was placing the first on the slicer, I decided to walk back to the counter and verify just to be sure. Apologies, was that a half pound of everything, I asked? She only half turned back to me and muttered an affirmative with an accompanying nod and dismissive flick of her hand while her friend made a little more eye contact with me. That was enough for me, and I went back to work. Cut each item one by one for the customer and lined them up on the counter for her one by one. I finished slapping the last sticker after weighing the last item and asked if she was sure there wasn't anything else I could assist with. This is where a fairly normal interaction went a little crazy. She picks up the first one and looks at it and slams it on the counter and picks up another to look at it. Then she started screaming at a volume that could easily be heard across the entire store. I said I want a pound of everything! I was pretty stunned. And imagine I stood there blinking at her for a couple of seconds before I was able to respond, explaining that I had been unsure and even asked her again before I started slicing. Apparently this wasn't what she wanted to hear because she got louder and started stamping her feet, repeating over and over that she wanted a pound of everything and that I had asked her no such thing, while I kind of stood there like a deer in the headlights. The other 2 I was working with just kind of stared in shocked silence as well, having little idea about what was going on. There were no other customers, so one of them could have probably been helping me with the order in retrospect. I'm fairly fortunate it didn't last long. I made brief eye contact with the other woman again, who tugged on the sleeve of her raving friend and told her that I had, in fact, just asked about the quantity, and she had told me a half a pound was accurate. There was an immediate change. This lady at last had the decency to be absolutely mortified by her own behavior, apologizing profusely for the entire duration that it took me to prepare another half pound of everything she requested. It was a struggle not to laugh at her during the time it took me to finish the order, mostly out of nervousness and slightly frazzled nerves over the ridiculousness of it all. She left politely enough, and for the next couple months it was the running joke of the department that we wanted a pound of everything. Take my award to ease your trauma. I'd also like a pound of Genoa salami, sliced very thin. And our second story. Parking War Revenge. I live in a small cul-de-sac, which has another small cul-de-sac leading off it. I sometimes park my fully liveried work van, VW Caddy, which is the size of a VW Golf, in the other cul-de-sac, which I technically don't live in if there's no parking available in the part where my house is. It's only 10 meters or so away, and I can still see it from my house. There's a family that live on the corner that don't like people parking where I park because it's opposite of their driveway and causes them a bit of extra effort to get their car on and off the driveway. If I'm not parked there, someone else will. This is completely normal, legal, and socially acceptable in the UK, where roads are smaller and parking's more limited. Also, cars are smaller here than in other countries. Talking to you, Americans. As a result of this, they regularly phone my work to complain about the van parking there. I only park here if the spaces outside my house are full, which are usually occupied by people who live in the other cul-de-sac. They also phone other people's companies to complain about people parking in that completely legal on-street parking. They never knock on doors to ask about cars parked there. They just phone up to complain if the vehicles have the company details on them. We all just ignore the complaints now, so it's just an inconvenience, but they still keep doing it. They must realize it's not working. So just to clarify, where I park the van is on the opposite side of the road. I'm not actually blocking the driveway in any way at all. It just makes it slightly less convenient for them to drive on and off their driveway. It's completely legal parking space. In the UK, in residential areas, unless the local government put them in place, there are usually no parking restrictions. Anyone can park there as long as there are no restrictions and the vehicle is taxed, insured, MOT'd, and not causing an obstruction. The idiots on the corner just complain to companies because they can, and they're over-possessive about the road outside their property. They never complain face-to-face to people if cars are parked there. This family's house has a border with the entrance to the road, and the bushes have become very overgrown recently, as they do every year, and they never cut them despite being asked by multiple people who live in the cul-de-sac because they think the council should cut them, even though they're part of their garden and it's their responsibility to cut them back. My revenge is this. I started complaining every week on the app, Fix My Street. Because the hedges are obstructing the road, the council came out to inspect, and I happened to be in where the council did the inspection and spoke to the guy. Turns out they've had multiple letters and warnings about this over the years and have ignored them all because of council cuts. They haven't had the resources to deal with it for the past few years. But because I complained and the hedges are obstructing the road, the council's obliged to act. They sent a warning which said the owners have 28 days to cut the hedge or the council will arrange it and send them a bill. It'd cost about £300 for them to have it done themselves, but the council will charge $2,000 because of the admin and legal costs if they have to do it. Of course, they just ignored it, and the council workers turned up with chainsaws and cut it all back. I wasn't in when it happened, but my neighbor said the wife in the house went back crap crazy at the workers who just ignored her. Then the police turned up, who spoke to the council workers, who showed the police the paperwork, which they explained to the woman, and she went in the house. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see the aftermath, but I reckon they are very PO'd. There have been other issues with this family that I'm not putting here. They're known to be unreasonable. They've caused problems for other neighbors. They're the archetypal Karen family, especially the mother. My neighbors all agree with me and are more than happy that these people have finally had some comeuppance. No one else has any problem with parking on this road apart from them. The rest of us are adults and share. If you're going to pick holes and be rude, please do something else with your day. I always wonder about people like this. Do they lack intelligence? Or do they simply think if they do the same thing over and over that one magical day it'll work? And our last story. Nightmare tenant that thinks they own the house. Cast, landlord is LL. Nightmare tenant is Sarah. Tenant in basement suite, Paul. This started last year. LL was trying to get the Sarah out of their home as they were causing damage to the home. The hearings to get them out did not work and only allowed the Sarah to stay longer than LL wanted. As the months went on, damage was more than what was originally thought. For example, the closet doors were taken or removed, there were holes in the walls, the patio had to be repaired because of NT's dogs or Sarah putting up tarps, which collected moisture, damaging the wood. The main damage that was noticed by the LL was that Sarah installed a stripper pole, damaging the hardwood flooring. There was a constant back and forth with hearings to get Sarah out, both LL and Sarah fighting constantly. There were demands of compensation for unpaid bills. How is that the landlord's responsibility? Constant calls for emergency repairs, even though there were not really emergencies. Demands for discounts on rent, a portion of rent to be deducted from the total, and harassment from the Sarah via texts and emails. The Sarah also claimed that it was now her house since she's paid LL's mortgage or rent for 3 or 4 years. Just FYI, it was not rent to own. Anyway, she claimed appliances were broken, there were leaks in the newly renovated shower, there was no heat, and wanted an expensive heater courtesy of the landlord, etc. It only got worse. The Sarah started harassing the Paul. It got to the point that Sarah and Paul got into an altercation or assault as the police were called, and they initially believed the Sarah claiming to be a victim. However, the charges that day were dismissed for no evidence. Sarah continued to the police on Paul for no reason. Sarah then began looking into Paul's windows, taking pictures for no reason also. It got to the point where the police stopped believing her and started to believe that Sarah was the real problem. Update. The LL did an inspection of the property after giving 24 hours notice, of course. Sarah invited her family to intimidate LL and SO. It was crazy. LL was called names, taunted, and yelled at by the Sarah and family. It seemed like it was all set up. The police weren't called, but LL was left shaken by it. LL was able to get more pictures of the damage. Update 2. Paul had another problem with Sarah. The Paul and Sarah share laundry suite, and Sarah tried to frame Paul as Sarah's door was open to make it seem like a trespassing violation. It was lucky for Paul that they called LL and the police to get this settled. It's really sketchy. Paul didn't get into trouble or anything, but the police are getting fed up with Sarah as the police have visited countless times by now. LL has theorized that Sarah wants Paul out of the home as well because Sarah thinks they own it and want the home to themselves. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.